wilderness is a cathedral of silence and sound, a paradox that hums beneath your boots with every step. A symphony of wind through pine needles, the crack of a branch underfoot, the distant shriek of a hawk piercing the vastness above. For over a decade, I've been its warden, a park ranger named Roy Grayson, tasked with tracing its trails and guarding its secrets across the sprawling parks of this nation. I've stood atop sun-bleached cliffs in Arizona, their edges sharp as regret, and wandered the fog-choked forests of Maine, where the trees lean close as if to whisper. Each place has its mood, serene one moment, merciless the next, but none carved itself into my soul like the Yukon-Charlie River's National Preserve in Alaska. It was late summer 2016 when I arrived there, reassigned after a quiet stint in Colorado, my duffel bag slung over one shoulder and my boots still caked with the dust of another life. That land, a 2-million-acre expanse of jagged peaks and subarctic wild, was a place where civilization frayed to threads, where the air tasted of ice and earth, and where the locals spoke in hushed tones of the spine, a ridge like a fossilized backbone cutting through its heart. What I found there wasn't just a job. It was a descent into a nightmare that still gnaws at me, even now, as I write this in the dim light of March 27, 2025. The Yukon-Charlie is a world apart, a wilderness so remote that cell towers are a fantasy, and the nearest outpost feels like a memory you can't quite grasp. My days there began with the rhythm of routine, checking trails for erosion, monitoring wolf packs through binoculars, scribbling notes in a weather-beaten logbook. The solitude suited me. After years of drifting from one nowhere job to the next, cook to trucker to mechanic, I'd grown accustomed to my own company. But that morning, the radio broke its usual static hum with something sharper. Reports of strange animal behavior in the spine, a sector few dared to tread. Hikers had vanished there over the years, their fates swallowed by the cold or blamed on misadventure, while locals muttered about wildlife gone feral and sounds that didn't belong, eerie wails, footsteps without a source. I'd heard the tales around flickering bar lights in nearby towns, dismissed them as the kind of yarn spun to scare greenhorns. To me, they were a checklist of hazards, nothing more. That day, I was sent to investigate, a task as ordinary as it was ominous. I packed with care, my hands steady from years of habit. A canteen of water cold enough to ache in my throat, a first aid kit patched with duct tape, a GPS device that flickered in the deep hollows, my standard issue firearm, a .45 with a grip worn smooth, and a satellite radio that promised connection but rarely delivered. The gun was a talisman, less for use than for the weight of it against my hip. Grizzlies and wolves roamed these lands, but they were predictable, their threats readable in tracks and scat. I drove 10 miles in a parked truck, its frame rattling over ruts, the engine coughing like an old man's last breath, then parked at the trailhead and hiked the rest, my boots sinking into moss that smelled of damp decay. By mid-morning, I was deep in the forest, the silence a living thing. Oppressive, unbroken by bird song or the skitter of squirrels, just the groan of swaying pines and a faint rot that clung to the air like a warning. The coordinates led me to a cluster of campsites along a shallow river, its waters glinting silver under a sky bruised with clouds. The scene was a tableau of abandonment. A tent torn at the seams, its fabric fluttering like a wounded bird. A fire pit charred and cold, ash scattered by some unseen hand. A backpack half buried in moss, its straps frayed. Then I saw the tracks. They were pressed deep into the mud near the riverbank. Clawed impressions the size of a bear's, but wrong, too elongated. The toes splayed in a way that hinted at something almost humanoid. I crouched, my glove brushing their edges, the sharpness telling me they were fresh, made within hours. My breath fogged in the chill as I traced their outline, a ripple of unease curling up my spine. I thumbed the radio, static spitting back like a curse. No signal, no surprise. Reason told me to mark the spot and retreat, but something primal urged me forward, a need to know what left those prints. I followed them, the trail weaving through the woods, crossing the river's icy shallows where the cold bit through my boots, then climbing a rocky incline dusted with lichen. The forest thickened, pines looming like sentinels, their shadows stretching long and thin. A weight settled over me, a prickle at my neck, the unshakable sense of eyes boring into me from the dark. I scanned the trees, hand hovering near my firearm, but saw nothing, just the endless green and gray of a world indifferent to my presence. At the ridge's crest, the tracks ended abruptly at a cave's mouth, a black gash in the rock exhaling a stench of rot and ammonia that stung my eyes. The air was heavier here, damp and sour, the silence so complete it felt like a hand clamped over my mouth. Every instinct screamed to turn back, a chorus of warnings from a lifetime outdoors, but duty, or maybe a stubborn refusal to yield, pushed me forward. I unholstered my .45, the metal cold against my palm, clicked on my flashlight, its beam a frail spear against the dark, and stepped inside. The cave swallowed me whole, the light cutting through blackness to reveal a slaughterhouse floor. Bones strewn haphazardly, some animal, some unmistakably human, gnawed and shattered by jaws too massive to imagine. Ribs jutted like broken fingers, skulls grinned eyeless from the dirt, and femur fragments gleamed pale in the gloom. My stomach churned, while rising sharp in my throat, but I forced my legs deeper, the beam trembling slightly in my grip. At the back, a nest loomed, a crude tangle of branches, leaves, and shredded fabric, its edges embedded in the stone walls, gouged with claw marks that stretched higher than my reach. Then I saw it. A figure crouched at the nest's edge, its form barely kissed by my light until it rose. 8 feet of nightmare-given flesh. Matted fur cloaked its warped frame, dark and slick as if wet with blood. Its arms dangling too long, knuckles brushing the ground, legs bent like a beast's ready to spring. Its head was a grotesquerie, an elongated wolf skull, flesh clinging in patches, eyes glowing red in the flashlight's glare. It turned, slow and deliberate, and lunged with a guttural snarl that shook the cave walls, a sound that sank into my bones like a blade. I fired twice, the shots deafening, flashes lighting its twisted maw for a split second. Dark, viscous blood oozed from its shoulder, dripping to the floor with a wet splat, but it didn't fall, just recoiled, howling a noise that split my ears, half scream, half wail, a sound no living thing should make. Panic seized me and I ran, half sliding down the incline, rocks skittering underfoot, the forest closing in as its cries chased me through the trees. The howls grew louder, nearer, a cacophony of rage crashing through the underbrush behind me. My lungs burned, breath ragged in the cold. As I veered into a thicket, branches clawing at my legs, tearing my pants, drawing thin lines of blood. A voice called from ahead, faint, garbled, mimicking human tones but wrong. A cruel parody that twisted my name into nonsense. I stumbled into a clearing, tripping over a root, pain flaring bright in my shoulder as I hit the ground. Bones littered the space. Deer, rabbit, human. Arranged in crude patterns, spirals and crosses that made my skin crawl. At the center stood a gnarled tree, its bark etched with symbols I didn't recognize, jagged lines and curves that pulsed with intent. To ward off or summon, I couldn't tell. The creature emerged from the tree line, its unnatural grace chilling me to the marrow, limbs bending in ways anatomy forbade, eyes burning red. I raised my firearm, emptied the clip, bullets thudding into its chest and arms. It barely flinched, frenzied by the wounds, and swiped with claws the size of butcher knives, tearing through my jacket and gouging my side. Blood soaked my shirt, warm and sticky, as I grabbed a chipped knife from the dirt and plunged it into its leg, twisting until bone cracked. It screamed, a blood-curdling wail, and staggered back, its movements erratic. Clutching my side, I fled, the pain a dull roar as I staggered toward the river. The icy water hit me like a fist, the current threatening to drag me under, but I clung to a fallen log, letting it carry me downstream. Hours later, I washed up on a gravel bar miles away, my body battered, wounds caked with dried blood, the silence of the forest a heavy shroud. I stumbled to a ranger station the next morning, my colleagues staring in shock as I recounted the night. A search team found the cave, the bones, the symbols, but not the creature. Blood samples came back inconclusive, the report pinning it on a rogue bear, a tidy lie for the public. Months later, I dug into old files. Reports from the 1900s of a wild man terrorizing trappers. Its description a mirror to what I'd seen. Tall, clawed, unnaturally smart. The spine sealed now, off-limits under the guise of protecting bats. But I know better. It's out there lurking patient. Tell me, reader, if you stood at that cave's edge, would you step into its dark, or turn away, praying it never finds you? The Devil's Grin, a Maine nightmare unveiled. Northern Maine is a land of raw edges. Dense forests of pine and fir spilling into cliffs that jut like broken teeth. Rivers carving paths through stone with a relentless hiss. I'm Ellis Drayton, a park ranger since 1998, stationed at Baxter State Park near a weathered station that smelled of damp wood and coffee grounds. I'm no survivalist dreaming of noble battles with nature, nor a poet spinning verses about its majesty. I'm a man who respects its quiet ruthlessness, its ability to give and take without warning. That day in '98 began with the mundane. A raven croaking atop the station's slanted roof, its black eyes glinting as I sipped burnt coffee from a tin mug. The assignment was simple. Find David and Mara, two hikers overdue from the Devil's Grin Trail, named for the cliffs that grin down like a predator's maw. Missing persons weren't rare. Most stumbled back, sheepish and hungry, but something in their friends' voices, tight, edged with fear, stayed with me as I set out. I packed light, an axe with a chipped handle, a first aid kit stuffed in a canvas pouch, a radio strapped to my shoulder, a flask of coffee strong enough to strip paint. The morning light filtered weak through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the mossy ground as I hiked the uneven trail, loose stones crunching underfoot. An hour in, their campsite emerged from the trees. A tent slashed open from the inside, its nylon hanging in jagged strips. A fire pit smoldering faintly, embers glowing like dying stars. A single sneaker, mud-caked and forlorn, abandoned near a trampled bag of trail mix. The scene spoke of panic, a flight interrupted. Beyond the camp, tracks stretched into the mud, elongated, clawed, bear-like but too narrow, the toes too sharp, too deliberate. I knelt, my fingers hovering over the prints, a chill creeping up my arms despite the heavy air. The forest was silent. No birds, no wind, just the faint drip of dew from leaves. My hand lingered on the radio, but I held off reporting, needing more than tracks to justify the chaos it would bring. Park closures, media, questions I couldn't yet answer. The prints led deeper, the air growing heavier, as if the trees themselves leaned closer, their branches knitting a ceiling that choked the light. The trail descended into a narrow gorge, the Devil's Grin cliffs looming above, their granite faces streaked with moss and lichen, dark and unyielding. At the base, a cave yawned, its entrance veiled by hanging vines, exhaling a foul mix of rot and damp earth. I called out, "David? Mara?" My voice echoing into the dark, unanswered save for the drip of water within. The smell clawed at my throat as I gripped my axe tighter, parted the vines and stepped inside. The cool air hit me like a slap, my flashlight's beam slicing through the blackness to reveal a floor littered with bones. Deer ribs, a cracked elk skull, and others disturbingly human. A femur snapped clean, a jawbone resting against the wall. My beam caught a torn jacket, stained dark with dried blood. Mara's, her driver's license crumpled in a pocket, her face staring blankly from the plastic. A low scratching pricked my ears, like nails dragging on stone, and I swung the light toward it. From the shadows it unfurled. A sinewy, gray thing, its skin stretched taut over ribs, a warped mockery of a cougar starved and twisted by something cruel. Its limbs bent at unnatural angles, claws clicking on the stone, and its head tilted, regarding me with eyes that gleamed yellow in the dark. It lunged, faster than thought, and I swung my axe, the blade biting deep into its shoulder. A high-pitched shriek erupted, a sound that made my eardrums throb, as it staggered back, circling with fluid menace. I stumbled, foot catching on a bone, and it pounced, claws raking my chest, shredding my shirt, searing gashes into my flesh. Pain flared white-hot as I drove the axe upward, catching it under the jaw, dark blood dripping onto the floor. It recoiled, and I ran, lungs burning as I climbed from the gorge, the forest darkening around me. Another ranger, Joel, found me on the trail, his sidearm drawn as the creature leapt again, its pale form stark against the trees. He fired, bullets thudding into its flank, and it faltered, one leg buckling. I grabbed a heavy branch and swung, connecting with its head. A sickening crack as it shrieked and bolted, its movements erratic, pained. We retreated, the cave later yielding the hiker's remains. Bones, blood, shredded gear, but no creature. The report called it a bear attack, dismissing my protests, Joel's pale silence backing me up. I resigned soon after, the memory of its gray, twisted form a weight I can't shed. Listener, if you faced that thing in the dark, would you swing or run, hoping the shadows don't follow? The Beartooth Silent Hunter, a Montana reckoning. Montana's Beartooth Wilderness is a land of extremes. Jagged peaks piercing the sky, sprawling pines whispering in the wind. A solitude I sought in 2016 as Ranger Cyrus Mandel. I'd requested the post after years of restless wandering, craving the simplicity of trails and quiet nights. That day began with mud to my knees, dragging a fallen log off a washed-out path near Elk Lake. The air thick with the scent of wet earth and pine sap. My radio crackled mid-task. Harrison Lively, a camper, missing after failing to check in. Lila, another ranger, would start at the trailhead. I'd scout higher ground. I climbed the elevation trails, the silence unnerving. No birds, no breeze, just the muffled crunch of my boots on dirt. A stillness that felt like the forest holding its breath. His campsite appeared in a hollow. A tent half collapsed, its nylon shredded. A backpack lying open, contents strewn. A fire pit cold but intact, embers suggesting recent use. Footprints, deep, erratic, marched downhill toward a ravine, their edges sharp in the soft earth. I radioed Lila, her voice cutting through static, and followed the trail, the trees thickening, their gnarled roots crisscrossing the ground like veins. The air grew dense, metallic as I descended into the ravine, finding Harrison's body slumped against a boulder. Torso gashed open, ribs gleaming, face a ruin of terror. Drag marks trailed deeper, churned earth leading to a cave's jagged mouth. Inside, bones littered the floor, animal, human, mixed with scraps of fabric and a cracked smartphone, its screen faintly glowing. I pocketed it, the air cold and damp, walls slick with moisture. A creature crouched at the cavern's end, massive, pale, its spine a ridge of jutting bone, hands clawed and almost human. It charged, a blur of sinew and fury, and I fumbled for my bear spray, the mist hissing between us. It snarled, recoiling, giving me seconds to retreat, tripping over rocks as I scrambled out. My heart pounded as I ran uphill, the forest a blur of green and shadow, until Lila's voice broke through my panic. She'd found me after my broken radio calls. The smartphone's last video showed Harrison's frantic breaths, a guttural roar, then darkness. A recovery team found his body, the cave's remains, but no creature. Officially, a bear attack. Unofficially, we stopped patrolling alone. I never returned. Reader, would you chase those tracks into the dark, or let the silence bury them forever? The Okefenokee's Crocodilian Curse. A swamp's secret. Georgia's Okefenoke Swamp is a labyrinth of black water and cypress. A humid sprawl where I, Brett Kern, sought peace in 2011 as a ranger. With my wife Jenna pregnant, the steady rhythm of the job felt like a lifeline, until a call shattered it. Kenneth Traylor, a solo camper, was missing near Billy's Lake, reported by his girlfriend after 3 days of silence. Paul Mitnick, a local ranger with 20 years in the swamp, joined me, his dry humor a balm as we loaded our boat with gear, first aid, rifles, Paul's inevitable granola bar stash. The channels snaked through dense underbrush, the air thick with decay and buzzing flies, a serene rhythm of frog croaks and fish splashes masking what lay ahead. We found Kenneth's campsite an hour in. A tent slashed open from the outside, clean and deliberate. A backpack half submerged, its contents scattered. A soggy journal noting strange noises, bigger, 2 legs, not 4. Tracks, 3-toed, deep, led away, too large for any known beast. An hour later, we found him. Sprawled in shallow water, chest torn open, ribs stark against the murk, face frozen in a grimace of dread. A low rumble pulsed through the silence, and from the trees burst a creature. 8 feet of matted fur, limbs unnaturally long, a crocodilian snout bristling with jagged teeth. It lunged at Paul, claws raking his chest. He fired point blank. I emptied my revolver into its side. It bellowed, a scream and a roar, retreating into the swamp. I dragged Paul to the boat, his blood soaking my hands, and we escaped, the motor's hum drowning my terror. The report said bear, ignoring the tracks, the wounds, my words. Paul survived, quit, and refused to speak of it. Weeks later, a grainy photo arrived. Stay out. The creature knee-deep in the swamp, staring. I transferred, leaving its secrets behind. What would you believe, listener, bear or a nightmare too real to name?